I mean, right now, you hear the mayor kind of touting Verdon coming in and the possibility that it will bring 2,000 jobs. Mr. Mayor, you are exactly correct. However, you're slow out the gate. Now, had I been running for mayor, I would have done that day one. There needs to be some integration, some synchronization, and some collaboration between the current city and the county. And I will tell you that the city is artificially small, and it's been artificially small for years. The truth is that the city should have grown by now. And then we were talking about the Hard Rock Hotel coming in here, which is great. But you know what those are? Those are service industry jobs. And I can tell you something, you cannot raise a family on a service industry job. I'm sorry, that doesn't buy a house. That doesn't send your kids to college.
That was Colonel Eric Shorter, candidate for Pensacola mayor. I'm Jim Little with the Pensacola News Journal, and we'll have more from him in a minute. I sat down with 5 of the 6 candidates running for Pensacola mayor and discussed their candidacy and what they wanted to do as the city's chief executive. Former City Councilwoman Ann Hill declined to do an interview. Before we get to the interview, let's first recap exactly what Pensacola is and the role of the mayor. Despite its smaller size compared to the rest of Escambia County, the city holds a central role in the region's local economy as the hub of commercial activity. And the mayor is the chief executive of the city government and has final say over a lot of what the city does and doesn't do. In the last mayoral election in 2022, D.C. Reeves won more than 51% of the vote in the August election against 3 other candidates. And what was seen at the time as a surprising margin, considering it was the first time Reeves had run for office and 2 of his opponents were former city council members. During that election, which occurred at the same time as the statewide primary races, only 15,029 people cast ballots, a turnout rate of about 36%. In the general election that followed that in 2022, city turnout increased to 57%, but the mayor's race had already been decided. Reeves is running for his second term as mayor, but it's an open question if he'll pull off a repeat of 2022 and win outright in August, or he'll face one of 5 challengers who will advance to a runoff and a broader city electorate in November. His challengers are Jermaine Williams, Alicia Treywick, Jasmine Brown, Colonel Eric Shorter, and former City Councilwoman Ann Hill. These interviews are presented with as little edits as possible to give you a sense of all 5 candidates who participated and their proposals for the city. They were filmed over the last few weeks of July and are being published together at the same time. The mayoral election is on August 18th and early voting begins August 8th. Now, here's my interview with Colonel Eric Shorter. I'm joined now by Colonel Eric Shorter. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So, to start out with, can you just tell me a little bit about yourself and your kind of life journey that kind of brought you to the decision to run for mayor?
Well, first of all, I'm a true son of Pensacola, born and raised in Pensacola. A lot of people don't believe that, but it is true. And with that being said, typically people tend to know more about my family than they know about me. What I've discovered is that I mentioned my first grandfather, who was Judge L. Martin, who was the first community action director for Head Start program. Most people think Willie Jr., and I go, no, my grandfather mentored Willie Jr. And then they'll ask me, and then I'll mention my other grandfather, who was Abraham Pierce, down here in the Belmont, the Villas area, from the 506. Suddenly everybody knows exactly who that grandfather was. Mm-hmm. And so having had an opportunity to serve in the military and acquire, the level of knowledge that I have, I thought to myself, well, I'm going to go ahead and retire and sit this out. And turns out a couple of my peers, retired Colonel Dan Bartlett, retired Colonel Tracy McMillian, and retired Lieutenant Colonel Wes Norman. The 2 male colonels are Pensacola natives, much like myself, and Colonel Tracy McMillian is from Fort Pierce. Mm-hmm. And so she, when we started talking about it, I'm like, I don't want to run for mayor. And so Major General Linton says, hey, Shorter and Farmer, put in for the GO board. And I'm like, well, I don't want to be a general officer. And so I'm sitting next to Dan as we're leaving Fort Dix, and we're talking about me running for mayor. And then suddenly he discovered I came out on the list for command, and he goes, "Shorty, you are going to be a general." And I went, "No, I think I'm going to run for mayor." And so I'm sweeping my porch, but I wasn't really settled on the idea of running. I was cleaning off my porch. I lived downtown, and I had gotten half of my porch cleaned. And as I was just about to wash the second half of the porch, it dawned on me that I've got a lot of experience and knowledge, and that I could help a lot of people here in Pensacola. And so I started thinking, okay, Pensacola, we have a chance. This is, with the level of knowledge that I currently have, and, with Dan Bartlett saying he's running with me, and Tracy McMillian and Lieutenant Colonel Wes Norman, I'm like, wow, what we can do. And we're not beholden to anybody. We have been public servants for the last 30 years. It's 120, let me see, that's four of us. Yeah, that's 120 years of service. And our only goal is to see Pensacolians have a better life, and it is possible.
Okay. So tell me a little bit more about your military career. What did you do? And
Oh,
how that play out?
how that transpired.
Yeah.
Well, initially I enlisted in the Air Force, and I was enlisted in the Air Force for about a year. And I ended up going over to Ellsworth Air Force Base out in South Dakota. And that's where I finished up my education at South Dakota School of Mines and Technology. And I stayed in roughly, like I said, about a year, and then I decided to join the officer producing program. And so basically it's like a green to gold. And then I became a Army officer. And then from there on, I started out as a signal officer, and then I transitioned from a signal officer to a field artillery officer, and then just kind of moving along in my career, and into a signal officer, serving in the Signal Corps. And now I, am an AG officer. I'm the adjutant general. I'm part of the AG branch. So, and of course, that journey, that 30-year journey has led me to Joint Base McGuire over in Joint Base. It's called Joint Base MDL, which is Fort Dix and McGuire base, located over in Wrightstown, New Jersey. And so as this career comes to a close, I'm at the point in my career now, either you become a general officer or you head to the House. And at this junction in my life, I'm ready for the next phase to begin. So, but I still feel like I've got gas in my tank. A lot of people have poured into me. The American people have spent a lot of money to create what's sitting in front of you. And it's the same for Dan, it's the same for Tracy, and the same for Wes. We've got a lot of knowledge, and we're not ready to just sit on the couch. And since we are natives of Pensacola, Florida, we have a chance to help the citizens of Pensacola, Florida. We've helped everybody else in the world. Why wouldn't we come home and help the people in our hometown?
Okay. So when you went off into initially the Air Force and then later the Army, like when did you come back to Pensacola? At what point?
So in 2004, I actually lived downtown. So I bought a house in 2004 downtown in downtown Pensacola.
Yeah.
And so I've been hanging around since 2004, just kind of hanging around in the area. I'm in and out of the area. My family still lives here, so quite a bit of my family, and to include my extended family. Both sides of my family are from Pensacola, like I said before. My father's family as well as my mother's family. So I'm always here. I've just been here. And I tell you, having been here since 2004 and lived downtown since 2004, I've watched the progression and the change that has occurred in Pensacola. And I'm thinking, it looks great, but we can do better. And so there you are.
Yeah. So you talked about you got the your colleagues who kind of push you to run.
That's
Are you saying you would come in and have them involved in?
Oh, absolutely. Any time, if you want a successful organization or administration, you're going to build your team. And you're talking about, when I start talking about my colleagues, I talk about Colonel Tracy McMillian and Colonel Dan Bartlett. And Colonel Tracy McMillian and Colonel Dan Bartlett and myself had an opportunity to participate in the running of CENTCOM. We managed 150,000 personnel, to include military personnel, civilians, contractors, foreign nationals, displaced people, non-governmental organizations. You got to have a good team in order to manage that many people and to manage another country and borders. So Yes, Dan was the SPO, Tracy was the G3, now the chief of staff. I'm now the G1, and the G1 is basically I'm on the general staff. And it's funny because I always tell everybody, wait a minute, I'm the adjutant. So so we have seating. I'm sitting here. I'm like, when the general is gone, or and when change of commands occur, guess who's in charge? It is me until I give it to the chief of staff, and then I become a member of the staff.
Um, so you said so you came back to Pensacola in 2004, and obviously, like everyone knows about the change that's happened since then, especially downtown and just the areas around. And you said it's good, but we can do better. What kind of what would you
Oh,
want to see this one done better?
well, listen, I'm very clear about this all the time. In order to truly begin to move an organization forward, and as Lieutenant Colonel Wes Norman said to me, Shorter, you've been everywhere, you've seen everything. So, with that being said, I know what is possible. Uh, I've seen all kinds of things. I tell you something I'd like to see. I was having a conversation with one of my neighbors this morning, Mr. Brandon, and he and his family moved here from Nashville, and they were talking about different things that they've seen in Nashville. And he was saying he'd like to see more big business, which would draw larger crowds into Pensacola. And he was talking about the possibility of maybe a hotel like the Marriott or something like that. And I thought, okay, that's possible. I understand where you're going. I told him, and so I said, well, listen, why don't we take Pensacola Civic Center and move it to North Palafox and create a convention center, which would give us the opportunity to host lots of conventions from all of these surrounding areas and start to draw people in. We know that New Orleans has a large drawing of people that come in, but I can assure you that Pensacola is more than capable of competing with New Orleans and some of these other large venues. You've got Atlanta, so I think we could overtake Mobile quite easily. Who doesn't want to hold a convention in Pensacola, Florida, and have access to our beaches and some of the things that we have? So I think if we built a convention center, started looking at the possibility of renovating some of those buildings down there on North Palafox and creating sort of an Art Deco area, we could do a lot of great things. I mean, right now, you hear the mayor kind of touting Burdon coming in and the possibility that it will bring 2,000 jobs. Mr. Mayor, you are exactly correct. However, you're slow out the gate. Now, had I been running for mayor, I would have done that day one. Because with that being said, I realized that I have a different level of knowledge. And so I would have made it part of the National Strategic Defense Initiative because it has a railroad track on the outside of it. And so, like I said, there are hundreds of billions of dollars that are available to Pensacola. And so I had a chance to tour the port with Mr. Scott Lance. And as I toured the port, myself and Colonel Bartlett, Dan Bartlett, we toured it. We talked to him about NDTA and where this money was. And then, of course, we discussed the berths with the Port Authority, the port director, and he was talking about the repairs that would need to be done. And the repairs are roughly about $20 million for each one of the berths. They've got a total of 6 berths there. But that money is available if you know what you're doing. And then the possibility of establishing shipping lanes and things of that nature. So there's a lot of economic opportunity that is possible. And what I will say is that I think with the bringing in of the jobs from Burdon, that is the tip of the iceberg. That's only a fraction of what is possible.
Yeah, yeah. And so, just like when you talked about the Civic Center, is that like a serious idea you want to do, or
Oh,
is that
absolutely.
okay,
So where the Civic Center is sitting right now is no, it should have never been there. I want you to stop and think about how you come in there and you see the Civic Center, and then you also see the technology park, that is adjacent to that area and that property.
Yeah.
It is a logistical nightmare.
Yeah.
Should have never been there. And so, but I think if we were to build a convention center, imagine the business that we could bring into Pensacola and with the conventions, and we moved it to North Palafox. It could be better situated. And I've been over on North Palafox looking around at the property, and I don't know when the last time you've driven down North Palafox, but there is opportunity. And so, of course, it would require us to, meet with engineering and some architects and figure out, what it is that we could build and whether or not we would be able to produce enough parking.
Yeah.
So if we were to relocate.
Yeah, I guess in my mind, the first thing I think is that how would you pay for something like that, especially when the current base center is controlled by the county government? I know they've been talking about expanding it as a convention center in that location where it is. but the county kind of controls the bed tax, which is what has been funding
Right.
the base. And
Well, I will tell you what's kind of interesting. There needs to be some integration, some synchronization, and some collaboration between the current city and the county. And I will tell you that the city is artificially small and has been artificially small for years. The truth is that the city should have grown by now. And Dan and I were talking about that. His mother lives out there right off of Fairfield, but she lives in the county. And because she lives in the county, she's not on Pensacola's sanitation system. And with that being said, she's had to get a sewage tank, but she's had to have multiple inspections. There's lots of bureaucracy. But I think if we expand the city, we would have an opportunity to tap into another source of revenue, potentially create a decrease in people's property taxes. Because right now we know that the city is roughly 56,000 people, and the county has 350,000 people out there with over $500 million in revenue that comes in, tax revenue.
Yeah, and
there is opportunity.
Yeah. If that kind of brings up the whole issue coming up this fall that's going to be on the ballot is the property tax reform, and where do you stand on that?
I will tell you, being a resident here in Pensacola and paying property taxes, nobody wants to pay them. And you know what? And I'm certainly in that boat where nobody wants to pay. But we all understand that if this amendment passes, and I suspect that it will cause a shortfall in our government. But there are certain things that are carved out, like safety, the police, and some various projects. But beyond that, we would need to take a step back and start to look at the entire budget that the city has. And once you go into the entire budget, I can assure you there are programs. We would need to look at wants versus needs versus must-haves, and that is currently something that I'm doing right now. I'm going through budgets and I'm looking at everyone's budget, and I've discovered that the operations group, the G3, has a slush fund. No, sir. We are going to turn all of that money back in, and we're going to look at each and every item.
When you say G3, what do you
The G3 is what I've been doing in the military, looking
okay.
at, the G3 is the director of operations, and they've got a slush fund. They control quite a bit of money, and I'm like, whoa, what are we doing here with this money? You shouldn't be having that money. And so, which allows them to do certain things. But it's like any budget. There is fat in the budget. And I will tell you that I had a chance to look at the DOGE report that was put out, and I think we have to go through, because there are efficiencies that we can drive into the budget. I'm one of these guys. I'm not interested in fraud, waste, or abuse. And what is it that what can we do? We have to evaluate, what do we need, what do we want, and what are the must-haves. And after we pare down what the must-haves are, then we can start to talk about what it is that we need, and then we can start to address what do we want. So
you're talking about the DOGE report that came out for the state of Florida did on Pensacola?
That's correct.
Did anything about that stand up? A lot of the critics of it said it seemed more like a political attack on local home rule in general, and the fact that they pointed out the Sanger Theater booking the drag show when it was
that's been a source of contention, and to me that thing right there is more of a cultural sort of thing, depending on the culture. And if you look at Pensacola as a whole and look at the demographics of Pensacola, it's mostly a Republican state, and so people may tend to be a tad bit more conservative versus being liberal. So I think that everything has to be taken with a grain of salt. We've got to take a step back, and we have to figure out what is best. But at the same time, with that being said, let me be clear about something, that everybody has a right to be in the city of Pensacola, in the state of Florida, regardless of whatever. We're all God's children.
Yeah. Do you think, have you looked at the city's budget at all to find things that stand out to you?
I've not combed through it with a fine-tooth comb. Like I said, I went through and I looked at the revenue, and I was looking at the county's budget, and I was looking at, I think it was like $526 million that they were taking in. And you're probably thinking, why are you looking at the county versus the city's budget? I've looked at the city's, and I was looking at how it was broken down, and the Downtown Improvement Board, and how they were executing some of their money. And I've been looking at the city's budget with what we were doing with respect with money to the homeless population and just various little things. But I've been looking at the county because I'm under the impression that the city is artificially small. And like I said, there needs to be some collaboration, some synchronization, and some integration between the city and the county. And and one of the things that I'm looking at is I'm thinking to myself, why haven't we had a sit-down meeting between FPL and ECUA? What is going on here? Years and years ago, I can remember Gulf Power was here, and I don't know if you all were part of that period in history where we had I think it was either a $15 or a $10 customer service charge. And I looked at it and I said, you realize that they've got a customer service charge on our bills here. And at 56,000 people, what does that number look like? That's a lot of money that you're taking in. And if you're going to take that kind of money in, I always ask the question, how are you spending it? Because I will tell you that I did not see the infrastructure upgrades that should have happened. We are in an area that is subject to hurricanes and things of that nature. So we should have been burying power lines or putting up cement poles, et cetera. And that was not happening. But of course, with that being said, I'm thinking to myself, how are you getting rate increases? Because in order for you to have a rate increase, that rate increase has to be approved by the Public Utilities Commission. So what is going on here? What are our county commissioners doing? I mean, talk to me, So
Yeah.
there needs to be a come to Jesus meeting.
Yeah. So does you think that involves like consolidating the county and city government, or does it just involve like annexing more into the city to grow?
I would probably say I would probably, myself personally, I think we would need to sit down and have a conversation about it. And some of it will more than likely be annexed.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Because there are people that live out in the county that would like to have the benefit of the city services. I will tell you that when I look at the county, I think to myself all the time, yeah, they've got county commissioners, that's great, but it looks like to me taxation without representation. And so I think it would be nice if they had a focal point that they could say, hey, Mr. Mayor, hey, Mrs. Mayor, this is happening, and you know what, and you will be accountable. Accountability and responsibility, and those two things are separate.
Yeah. And I guess the city residents pay, I think it's like 4.5 mils or close to that higher in property tax rates than the county. And with that tax amendment goes through, does that become an easier sell to convince people to accept annexing into the
Well,
city?
the question is that we would have to sit down, and I think once you sit down, you put things on paper, and people can see them in black and white. Pros and cons of anything that you're doing. People have to know what they're getting. Let's not sell somebody a what is it called? The term a bag of goods, and they don't know what they're getting. Currently in politics, they pass all kinds of bills every day. And they're 3,000 pages. No one's read the bill. They don't even know what it's in it. They're voting for it. No, 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 no. I'm very interested in transparency. Let the people know what it is that we're talking about. Let's look at the pros and let's look at the cons and let's have the conversation. Let's not just decide that, hey, we're going to annex you and here you go. There's nothing you can do. This isn't Russia and Crimea. Okay, let's sit down and let's have a conversation, because Pensacola is our city. To include the county, those are our cousins.
Yeah, I guess so you being in the military is kind of like the culture of inside the military of like, at least officially, very nonpartisan, that kind of thing. And this race is a nonpartisan race. But if you look at how the city, kind of the atmosphere inside the city the last few years of the current mayor endorsing a Republican for governor, and more organizations with kind of in reaction, like the No Kings protest, and that involving organizing that goes into like issues at the city, like flock cameras and things like that. You've had some local Democrat groups and some local socialist groups organize against that. So partisan politics is kind of playing a bigger role in city government. How do you kind of view the role of partisan politics, and kind of what is your own partisan view?
Well, I will tell you, as a mayoral candidate, I've been down to multiple city city council meetings, and as I'm down there, I have seen the people come up and talk about the flock cameras, and they talk about how the mayor unilaterally utilize funds that would have been for opioid abatement and utilize those to produce the flock cameras. Now, listen, there's two sides to every story. And I think that, before you put something out into the community deserves to have a conversation about it. Listen, I understand security. I understand national security. And if you look at my Facebook page, you will see that I'm out and about talking to the community as a whole. I was downtown and I was talking to some business owners, and the business owners said to me that when something happens, the police often ask them for their camera footage to see if they can find out what has gone on. And I saw the people talk about the flock cameras, and they're pretty passionate about it. And so I asked a police officer about the flock cameras on how they use those to solve crimes. And they explained to me that there was a particular member who is currently in government who had an issue, and turns out they were able to solve that person's crime utilizing information that they gathered via a flock camera. But of course, that person hasn't talked about it. I said probably maybe 2-3 years ago that my biggest fear was that Americans would trade their sense of privacy in the need for security, in the illusion of security. There's a lot of things that go on, and I will tell you that, when I think about flock cameras and the people that are down there protesting, those probably aren't the people that need to be worried about the flock cameras. We know that you go to Joe Patty's every Tuesday and then you stop by the local Walmart. But at the same time, in order to be respectful to all of the citizens of Pensacola, and whether they're in the city proper or out in the county coming into the city, we need to have had a conversation about it, because everything has good points and bad points. But I don't think partisanship should have anything to do with our city government. And you're right, the mayor endorsing the gentleman running for governor.
Yeah,
that's kind of a no-go. Some things you have to know when to just say mum on. You don't have to say anything one way or another. So, and my question is, you hear people say that they endorse things, but one thing is for certain: are you telling me that everybody that currently works for the mayor believes and feels the same way he does? I don't think so.
Going into the campaign, there's been a kind of a larger trend throughout the city. We've done stories about it of just like the city is becoming more, you want to call it gentrified, or becoming more white. The black population inside the city limits has fallen by like 10% over the last 20 years. Do you think the city is in a position to, I guess, elect a black mayor, and do you think you're that person?
Well, what I believe is that I've looked at the demographics of the city. The city is 20.1% black. The city is 66.6% white, 5% Latino, and the rest is other. With that being said, I think that the people of Pensacola are looking for the best possible candidate, and and what is it that they can do for the population as a whole. Listen, if they think Mr. Reeves is the best possible candidate, then he will be reelected. But if they think that, hey, there's somebody else that could do better, then that person may get an opportunity. I will tell you clearly, beyond a shadow of a doubt, I was last to enter the race, and there's a saying all the time: you save the best for what?
For last, right?
Bingo. And so you've heard me mention that I have vision, I have knowledge, I have experience, and I have leadership. I can assure you there is not one person running that could match my record. I can promise you that. And when I tell you that I've seen everything, if we sat down and we all talked about where we've been, what we've seen, and how to execute and to do these various things. I had an opportunity to sit on an interview yesterday, and they asked people about the infrastructure. Some people could answer the question, some people could not. What would you do first? They asked people about budgets. Okay, some people have had some experience with budgets. This is true. Let me tell you something. We are talking about this amendment coming down, and we're talking about the possibility of losing revenue. We don't have time for on-the-job training. We just don't. Look, I'm ready today, right now, to start. There's no guessing. I know what needs to happen, and there we are. And I understand growth, and I understand responsible growth. I understand. Like I said, I live downtown, and people talk about gentrification. Gentrification is a two-way sword. Okay, downtown is beautiful. The mayor has done a wonderful job. But the people did sell their homes. And then, of course, the neighborhood is not the same as it used to be. I live over in the area called the Tan Yard. Okay, the Belmont de Villiers area is not the same as it used to be. Yes, it has grown to be more white. But with that being said, the people that are here, they're looking for good jobs. They're looking for opportunity. They're looking for safe neighborhoods. And either you can or you can't. Recently there was the shooting that happened downtown on the 4th of July. And everyone's like, oh, these kids are out and all this youth is out and they're hanging outside the bars and, what do we do? And so now the mayor is currently talking about imposing a curfew.
Yeah.
Okay, and I said, sometimes there's a knee-jerk reaction to things. And so my question is, okay, we've got a curfew. What else you got? I will tell you that, listen, I've been in the military and I know what to do with 18 to 26-year-olds. You've got all these bubbas and bubettes and you've got to keep them busy. And so you know what? We need to look at other solutions. Because when I was growing up as a youth, we went to skating rings and they'd lock us in and we'd skate all night long. But that's not something that is happening with this new generation. So you've got to know how to reach them. And I will tell you, as I sit here, I know exactly what to do.
So
and I'm not guessing.
What do you do?
You build a USO. Have you ever been in a USO? So no, not the one in the airport.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the one while you're deployed overseas. So I was over in Kuwait. You come in, they may have 6, 7, I don't know, 96-inch screen television sitting there. You've got, all of these guys sitting there gaming. They've got a movie theater in there. They've got a place that's serving popcorn and drinks. They've got a place where people who go over and hang out, just kind of read. They may have a bowling alley. There are things that we could do in order to entertain the youth beyond a shadow of a doubt. And I can assure you, if we built such a facility, utilizing some of that land that the ECUA owns, because they've got thousands and thousands of acres, and of course using some of that land that they own to build some warehouses off-site. So if we started to establish shipping lanes into the city, we could create warehouse jobs and do storage, which is a huge moneymaker for the city. And listen, I'm going to digress for just a moment. You heard me mention the port previously. I will tell you what has gone on, that the city currently does not fund the port at all. And so, but they maintain oversight of the port. So basically, you're not going to give me any money, but you're going to tell me what to do. Okay, so you've created the bottleneck. So you've cut off our main source of income. Right now, you've got the Navy Yard and you've got Navy Federal. Those are your two big businesses right now in Pensacola. And I will tell you, as I've been out and about talking to people, I had a gentleman say to me, they're not building anything but hotels and Circle Ks. And I was like, what? And I'm like, and so as I started to think, I was like, well, there is a new Circle K up there off of Navy, and then there is a new Circle K right off of A Street and Garden. I mean, they're great stores. They look fantastic. And then we were talking about the Hard Rock Hotel coming in here, which is great. But you know what those are? Those are service industry jobs. And I can tell you something. You cannot raise a family on a service industry job. I'm sorry, that doesn't buy a house. That doesn't send your kids to college. That doesn't allow you to take your families on vacation. So we have to look at bringing in other economic opportunities. My apologies for digressing.
Oh, no, yeah. You were saying though that for youth opportunities, you would build kind of like a
Oh,
USO
absolutely. Yeah, they are phenomenal.
How would you go? Would that be a city-run thing, or would it be? How would you?
Well, you've heard me utilize the word collaboration, synchronization, and integration. We are going to have to. We're going to have to talk to the county because, like I said, they've got the property. So we're going to have to get together because we've got the revenue. We know that we have a problem, and so the question is, how do we resolve that issue? Yes, kids are out of school right now for the summer, and we know that I've got something that I call the Core Four. One of the tenets that I've got is neighborhood revitalization. And when I started talking about neighborhood revitalization, I talked about bringing in and putting in sidewalks in some neighborhoods that do not have them. Something as simple as a sidewalk, something as simple as street lights. Something as simple as updating a park or putting in a park or improving a current community center. These are things that improve the quality of life for various Pensacola residents. These things change things. But, I say all of that to say this, when we start talking about building this USO, so, maybe we have some collaboration with the county in order to bring something like that to fruition, because we have to look back and we have to see the benefit. Because you can be sure of one thing: all of these kids in Pensacola get in their cars. And when I was a youth, I would drive from a party here downtown, to a party on the beach, and then we all head back to Perdido Key, and we're all zooming around. And I can pretty much figure out that kids are moving around the same way I did. There's nothing new under the sun.
Right. And I guess it kind of comes back to the thing you were talking about, where the city needs to either get bigger or work with the county better. Is that
Absolutely.
kind of a theme that you've got with
Well, I haven't really gone out there and ruffled anyone's feathers to tell them, but I am very clear that the city is artificially small and should have grown years ago, beyond a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah. So I guess, what is your jumping into politics after being in the military for so long? What's that been like?
Well, I will tell you what's interesting is that, there have been a lot of people that have poured into me over the years, a lot of people. And that's me and my colleagues. They've poured a lot of gas into us. And, as we come to the close of the sunset of our military career, we still have got fuel in the tank. And we still have the need to serve. Just because you retire doesn't mean you don't stop serving. I will tell you, I can remember my aunt was working, she was a retired funeral home owner out of New Orleans over here, and she quit working, and she told me that she was now working harder than she ever worked for herself, and she was working for free. She was working with the Housing Authority and various charities, trying to bring about, change that would benefit us all as a whole. And hopefully we all get to the place and space there where we're all working for the betterment of everybody. But like I said, a lot of people have poured into me. I've got a lot of skills. You all have spent a lot of money for me to be Six Sigma trained, lean and green belts. And, I've got, you start talking about different things that we can do, executive level experience. We've got it. We've got it beyond a shadow of a doubt. And like I said, we're not guessing. We know what needs to happen. We can come in and we can look at organizations. We know what needs to happen. Listen, I'm the G1. When I tell you that I know what is going on in an organization, I was talking recently about management by observation. Listen, you can't figure out what's going on in your city if you're sitting in your office. You've got to be out and about. I was downtown. I was looking at the dedication of the new Palafox, and there were some gentlemen putting down a placard. And they were trying to get the placard properly cemented in place. And I thought, well, let me take a picture of this, because this is a very historic moment. And there was a young lady who worked for the city who was like, oh, well, let me get out of the way of the picture. And I went, yes, ma'am, let's do that, because I'm interested in the people that do the work. And I know she was like, did this man just tell me that? And of course, being a city employee, she's thinking to herself, what? And then the gentlemen that were doing the work were Spanish. And I was like, muy bueno, señor. And they were like, and so they started responding back to me in Spanish. And then I was like, okay, adios, as I take off and, finish my walking in the morning. I'm very interested in the people that are doing the work. I've been out talking to city workers. I've been told, what has gone on with respect to their pay and whether or not they've gotten a pay raise and what has gone on. And so, you know what? The only thing it does is make me curious. And if I get curious, then guess what? I get closer, and now I start to look a little bit closer at your operation. You might even find out that I'm working out of your building, because you know what? I want to see. I want to see. Yeah, I can't find out something by sitting in my office. I will tell you, and you may know this, having been in the military once upon a time. I get ready to go somewhere. Everyone has gotten everything. All the floors have been shined. Their boots, their uniforms look great. Their leadership is ready to have a conversation with me. I don't want to talk to you. I want to talk to the E3 and the E4, because they're going to tell me exactly what's going on in this organization. Hey, sir, I didn't get my child today. Hey, sir, I didn't get my pay is messed up. Hey, sir, I'm still a PFC and I should have been promoted to specialist by now. That's what I'm looking for, because I'm here to fix it. That's what I'm here to do.
Okay. Yeah, and I guess to kind of close off, kind of what we've been doing is if you want to give like just like 30, 60
My
seconds,
little
like just
elevator speech.
yeah, a little elevator speech, 30, 60 seconds of why
Okay,
people should
okay.
vote for you.
Well, listen, thank you. Well, listen, thank you for the opportunity to having me here. Listen, I'm Colonel Eric W. Shorter. I will tell you right now that vision, knowledge, experience, and leadership count. And I'm interested in the betterment of the people of Pensacola, Florida. And I can assure you that I can get us there. And no on the job training is needed. And so, Pensacola, we have a chance.
Well,
Thank you.
thank you, Colonel. I appreciate
Hey,
it.
thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you for having me.
absolutely.